Hey there, if you're watching this video, you are about to start doing summer reading for AP Lit. And this is Mr. K, by the way. I did forget my earphones, earpods, whatever, today. So if the sound is a little echoey, I'm sorry for that. But I wanted to talk through the summer reading assignment, and then which I'll read through here in just a moment. And then I'm going to read through and annotate chapter 1. It's a short chapter, short book. But just to show you kind of what the kind of annotations should look like, because it's an important process, and it gets you ready for coming into class. But also at the same time, I don't want it to be agony. I don't want you feeling like on every line you have to mark every single thing you see. Nothing will make you hate reading faster than being asked to do that. So, but still, there are things that I want you to be thinking through and marking, so that when we come together in August, that you're ready to take part in discussions and all that good stuff. So let me just read the assignment and then get right to it. So for summer reading, you are reading 2 works, 1 novel called Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, and then a play called Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. For this video, I'm just going to talk through Things Fall Apart. All right. So same process will apply to Death of a Salesman. So let me just read. A note before you begin. Welcome to AP English Literature and Composition. This course is built on a simple but profound idea that all literature participates in one overarching story. That story moves through 4 movements: creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. And every great work of fiction, drama, and poetry finds its place somewhere within it. This summer, you'll read 2 books that serve as our course's prologue. By the time we meet in the fall, you'll already have thought alongside Achebe and Miller, again, the authors, and you'll bring those thoughts to bear on everything else we read together throughout the year. The goal of this assignment is not to torture you with highlighters. It is to help you arrive in August as a reader who has been paying attention to the language, the characters, and the deeper questions these books are asking. Read at a pace that lets you enjoy the story. The annotation system below is designed to support that, not interrupt it. So first, just this idea that we'll be talking about all year, the grand narrative. That's what I call this class, really. I call it AP Lit, but to me, I've kind of titled this class the grand narrative. All right, so here's just a brief introduction. Our course is organized around 4 theological movements that are also the 4 movements of every great story. You don't need to memorize them for summer, just let them orient your reading. So first we have creation. The world begins in goodness, identity is given, the purpose is clear, characters are shown to us in their before kind of stage. They're full of possibility, embedded in a meaningful order. Everything is put together. Then there's the fall. Something breaks. Something falls apart. A choice is made, or a force descends, and the world is not what it was. Conflict, internal and external, enters into the story. Characters find themselves in exile from the life they were made for. Then we have redemption. Something or someone intervenes. A sacrifice is made, or a truth is faced. A path back or forward opens, often at great cost. So there is a way out of the fall. And then restoration. The wound is healed, or its absence is felt. The story resolves, and we understand what was really at stake. Some resolutions achieve restoration, others only deepen our longing for it. So a story might end, And there is no sense of restoration, and that's maybe the point, all right? So as you read this summer, you don't need to force every scene into one of these categories. Just hold them loosely in your mind. Ask yourself, where is this character in the story? Are they still in creation? Are they full of purpose and order? Or are they already deep in the fall? Right? Where are they in this kind of process? Now, here's how to annotate. Good annotation is a conversation with the text. It's not a performance for me. The goal is to leave traces of your thinking so you can find them again in August. Less is more. One sharp note is worth 10 highlighted lines. A reasonable pace is roughly 3 to 5 marks per chapter or scene. Some chapters will earn more, some will earn fewer. Follow the text, not a quota. Use the 4 marks below. That's all you need. All right. So again, I actually do read and annotate in my own time. This isn't just a thing I ask you or force you to do over the summer to give you busy work. This is actually a process that I use to be a better reader. Now, I don't necessarily use these 4 specific marks. Kind of depends on what I'm doing. These I just made for us for this summer. But I use some method when I'm reading because I want to engage with what I'm reading and actually try and experience something. Right. So for us, though, for this summer, I've given these 4 kind of marks. All right. Star, anytime you see a character moment, mark a moment that reveals who this person is, what they want, they fear, they believe. Write 1 word or phrase in the margin: pride, denial, longing, grief. Keep it short. Again, 1 quick note is worth much more than highlighting 15 lines and writing a paragraph in the margin. Unless that is something you want to do, right? I would never stop you from doing more, but you don't need to feel like you do that the whole book. That could be overwhelming. All right, a little squiggly for language worth noting. Underline a striking image, metaphor, or piece of diction that does more than its literal meaning. Don't underline whole paragraphs. Pick the line that earns it. And you may not even describe or explain every little image or metaphor, why it struck you, right? You may just be like, I don't know, it stuck out to me, and so I'm going to keep moving, all right? GN, or you could put the letter G for grand narrative. So this idea that we're going to be talking about throughout the year, mark a moment that feels like creation, fall, redemption, or restoration. Write one beside it. Trust your instinct. We'll discuss it in class. Again, you don't need to write me a paragraph in the margin explaining why this feels like creation or fall or redemption or restoration. Just keep a note of it. All right. So when we come together in class, we can have these discussions and we have a starting point. And it also kind of focuses you in on the text, all right? And then finally, this is a standard for basically anything we ever read. A question. Mark something that puzzles, troubles, or intrigues you. Don't explain it, just mark it. The best questions are the ones you don't have easy answers, or that don't have easy answers. The only exception I would tell you is if you come across a book, if you come across a word that you don't know, you got to look it up, man. I mean, you got to do that. And I do that constantly. So, that's a little different, right? Make a little mark beside the word and then you got to look it up. But, if something's happening in the story that you're like, I don't understand why that character picked that item up or said that thing or whatever, put a little question mark. All right. A note on marginal notes here at the bottom. When you do write in the margin, like I said, keep it to a word or a short phrase, not a sentence. The mark itself carries most of the meaning. If you're writing full sentences in the margins, you're working too hard and enjoying the book too little, unless you actually enjoy that process. All right. And I know most people, if not all, are reading this and being like, yep, not me. And that's okay. All right. But if you are one of those people, then go to town. All right. This is a little background on the book. So let me just read through this. And again, this just kind of guides our reading. All right. So Things Fall Apart was written by this guy named Chinua Achebe. That's, I believe, how we pronounce it, that right there. And this book was put out in 1958. Here's some background. Things Fall Apart is one of the most widely read African novels in the English language, and it was written as a deliberate act of reclamation, reclaiming something, right? Achebe grew up reading Western portrayals of Africa, particularly Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, and found them dishonest. Africa rendered as backdrop, Africans as shadows rather than people. He wrote this novel to tell a different kind of story, one in which an African society is seen from the inside, with its beauty, its complexity, and its contradictions fully visible. The novel is set in the Igbo village of Umuofia. I mean, I've taught this book like for years, and I still suck at saying that. In what is now Nigeria, in the late 19th century. Its protagonist, Okonkwo, is a man of tremendous physical strength and tremendous inner fear, and that combination is the engine of everything that follows. The title, Things Fall Apart, comes from a poem, W.B. Yeats's. We're going to read a bunch of his stuff this year, but called The Second Coming, which we'll read together in Unit 8. All right, the full line is, in the poem, things fall apart, the center cannot hold. All right, keep that image in your mind as you read. So what to notice as you read? The world before the fall. Achebe renders Umuofia as an ordered world before it begins to unravel. There are ceremonies and proverbs, seasons, roles, a whole grammar of belonging. This is worth noticing. The novel opens in something like creation. Then, 2 worlds, 1 stage. The arrival of Christian missionaries and British administrators is not simply an external plot event. It is a collision of 2 different stories about the world, 2 different grammars of meaning. One is overwriting the other. So we see the kind of white people, that's how it's phrased in the book, start to move in, all right? And so you see this clash of communities. All right, then the sound of the prose. Achebe admired the spare, rhythmic quality of the King James Bible, and it shows. The prose reads at times like oral traditions, at times like proverb, at times like tragic drama. Let the rhythms carry you. It really is some of the most beautiful writing I think I've ever read in this book. So, some guiding questions. Hold these questions loosely as you read. You don't need to answer or write these answers now. You don't need to write these answers now. That's what August is for. Let them focus your attention on what matters, all right? What does Okonkwo fear? Not his external enemies, his deep private fear. How does that fear shape nearly every decision he makes? What does it mean to be a man in Umuofia? Who defines that standard? Who enforces it? Well, what does it cost those who don't meet it? Number 3, the novel is titled after a line about things falling apart. At what moment do things actually begin to fall? Is there a single turning point or several smaller ones? Achebe never tells us what to think about Okonkwo. He creates sympathy and criticism simultaneously. Where did you feel most sympathetic to him? Where did you feel most troubled? And then last one, what is being lost as the novel progresses? Is it entirely loss? Or is the picture more complicated than that? Again, you don't need to answer these every chapter or every page or something ridiculous. Just be thinking through those. Those are ideas that we're going to unpack. All right, here's Death of a Salesman stuff. I'm skipping that for this video. All right, let me read chapter 1, and I'm going to annotate it. Feel free to steal these annotations for your first chapter. Again, that just kind of gives you a feel. All right, here we go. Chapter 1. Okonkwo was well known throughout the 9 villages and even beyond. His fame rested on solid personal achievements. As a young man of 18, he had brought honor to his village by throwing Amalinze, the cat. Amalinze was the great wrestler who for 7 years was unbeaten, from Umuofia to Mbaino. All right, I'm doing the best I can with the pronunciation. I know I sound like ridiculous. He was called the cat because his back would never touch the earth. It was this man that Okonkwo threw in a fight, which the old men agreed was one of the fiercest since the founder of their town engaged in a spirit of the wild for 7 days and 7 nights. A couple things that stick out to me. We see that he has fame, honor. What brings honor in this village? Throwing. Amalinze. All right, they wrestle. All right, he was unbeaten. And being fierce. All right, this is a community that values physical strength. All right, and who's at the top? Okonkwo, baby, he's the top. Here we go. The drums beat and the flutes sang, and the spectators held their breath. So we're going back to this moment when Okonkwo threw him. Amalinze was a wily craftsman, but Okonkwo was as slippery as a fish in water. Every nerve and every muscle stood out on their arms, on their backs and their thighs, and one almost heard them stretching to breaking point. In the end, Okonkwo threw the cat. That was many years ago, 20 years or more. And during this time, Okonkwo's fame had grown like a bushfire in the Harmattan. I remember looking up that word in the past. Hold on. Harmattan, but I believe it's like a storm. Hold on. Should have done this before I started the video, but that's okay. Hold on. Harmattan. A dry, dusty, northeasterly trade wind that sweeps across West Africa and the Sahara Desert. Okay. So, what I find interesting here, some word choice. Remember the little squiggly line? He is, Okonkwo's fame is related to things that are dangerous and destructive. A bushfire in the Harmattan, right? This massive dust storm that sweeps across the continent, and there's a bushfire that is spreading, right? Why didn't the author say that his fame had grown like the scent of freshly cooked food that just grows and grows and grows, right? Why wasn't it related to something else? Why was it related to fire and this dust? All right, that's interesting. I'm not even going to write it in the margins. I'm just curious, right? So maybe I even put a little question mark. Okay. We get some physical description here about Okonkwo. He was tall and huge, and his bushy eyebrows and wide nose gave him a very severe look. He breathed heavily. And it was said that when he slept, his wives, multiple, interesting, and children in their houses could hear him breathe. When he walked, his heels hardly touched the ground, and he seemed to walk on springs, as if he was going to pounce on somebody. And he did pounce on people quite often. He had a slight stammer, and whenever he was angry, he could not get his words out quickly enough. He would use his fists. He had no patience with unsuccessful men. He had no patience with his father. Okay, hold on a second. Unsuccessful men and his father, is there a comparison? Is he saying he had no patience with unsuccessful men? For example, he had no patience for his father. Or is he saying he had no patience with unsuccessful men? And also, in an additional point, but separate, he had no patience with his father. All right? Unoka, for that was his father's name. Here we go. We're going to get an answer. Had died 10 years ago. In his day, he was lazy and improvident. Improvident meaning improvident. not foreseeing and providing for the future. Does not provide. Okay? Was quite incapable of thinking about tomorrow, right? If any money came his way, and it seldom did, he immediately bought gourds of palm wine, called round his neighbors, and made merry. He always said that whenever he saw a dead man's mouth, he saw the folly of not eating what one had in one's lifetime. Unoka was, of course, a debtor, and he owed every neighbor some money, from a few calories to quite substantial amounts. He was tall, but very thin, and had a slight stoop. Right? That is a much different description than we get of Okonkwo. He was tall and huge, and his bushy eyebrows, right? Those two are an interesting kind of link there. He wore a haggard and mournful look, except when he was drinking or playing on his flute. He was very good on his flute, and his happiest moments were the 2 or 3 moons after the harvest, when the village musicians brought down their instruments hung above the fireplace. Unoka would play with them, his face beaming with blessedness and peace. Sometimes another village would ask Unoka's band, and their dancing agugu, to come and stay with them and teach them their tunes. They would go to such hosts for as long as 3 or 4 markets, making music and feasting. Unoka loved the good fare and the good fellowship, and he loved the season of the year, when the rains had stopped and the sun rose every morning with dazzling beauty. And it was not too hot either, because the cold and dry Harmattan wind was blowing down from the north. Some years, the Harmattan was very severe, and a dense haze hung on the atmosphere. Remember that Okonkwo was compared to the Harmattan. I did the wrong thing. Now it's being told it's very severe, and a dense haze hung in the atmosphere. So that's kind of calling back to that description of Okonkwo. He is also very severe. He might hang like a dense haze in the atmosphere. All right. Old men and children would then sit around log fires warming their bodies. Unoka loved it all, and he loved the first kites that returned with the dry season, and the children who sang songs of welcome to them. He would remember his own childhood, how he had often wandered around looking for a kite sailing leisurely against the blue sky. As soon as he found one, he would sing with the whole being, welcoming it back from its long, long journey and asking it if it had brought home any lengths of cloth. That was years ago, when he was young. Unoka, the grown-up, was a failure. He was poor, and his wife and children had barely enough to eat. People laughed at him because he was a loafer, and they swore never to lend him any more money because he never paid back. But Unoka, was such a man that he always succeeded in borrowing more and piling up his debts. One day, a neighbor called Okoye came in to see him. He was reclining on a mud bed in his hut playing on the flute. He immediately rose and shook hands with Okoye, who then unrolled the goatskin, which he carried under his arm, and sat down. Unoka went into an inner room and soon returned with a small wooden disc containing a kola nut, some alligator pepper, and a lump of white chalk. "I have kola," he announced when he sat down and passed the disc over to his guest. "Thank you. He who brings kola brings life, but I think you ought to break it," replied Okoye, passing back the disc. "No, it is for you, I think," and they argued like this for a few moments before Unoka accepted the honor of breaking the kola. Okoye, meanwhile, took the lump of chalk, drew some lines on the floor, and then painted his big toe. As he broke the kola, Unoka prayed to their ancestors for life and health and for protection against their enemies. When they had eaten, they talked about many things, about the heavy rains which were drowning the yams, about the next ancestral feast, and about the impending war with the village of Babaino. Unoka was never happy when it came to wars. He was in fact a coward and could not bear the sight of blood. And so he changed the subject, talked about music, and his face beamed. He could hear in his mind's ear the blood-stirring and intricate rhythms of the ekwe and the udu and the ogene, and he could hear his own flute weaving in and out of them, decorating them with a colorful and plaintive tune. The only effect was gay and brisk, but if one picked out the flute as it went up and down and then broke up into short snatches, one saw that there was sorrow and grief there. That's sticking out to me, sorrow and grief, but also this sense of joy, and color and vibrancy. So, I'm thinking of this character, Okoye. He's described as a failure, and weak. But also, all the stuff that's being described about him, he doesn't like war. He likes music. He likes food. He likes being with people. I mean, he sounds kind of awesome. So I'm being challenged here between like what I see as success and what Okonkwo sees as success. He is joyful. I'm going to put question marks because, Okoye seems like a really nice man, but in this culture, deemed a failure. All right. Okay. So I don't know. I don't really know what to do with that information. I just see there's a mixture of things here that don't really go together. So let's keep going. Okoye, yeah, we're almost there. Okoye was also a musician. He played on the ogene, but he was not a failure like Unoka. He had a large barn full of yams, and he had 3 wives, and now he was going to take the Idemili title, the 3rd highest in the land. It was a very expensive ceremony, and he was gathering all his resources together. That was, in fact, the reason why he had come to see Unoka. He cleared his throat and began, "Thank you for the kola. You may have heard of the title I intend to take shortly." Having spoken plainly so far, Okoye said the next half a dozen sentences in Proverbs. Among the Igbo, the art of conversation is regarded very highly, and Proverbs are the palm oil with which words are eaten. Okoye was a great talker, and he spoke for a long time, skirting around the subject and then hitting it finally. In short, he was asking Unoka to return the 200 cowries he had borrowed from him more than 2 years before. As soon as Unoka understood what his friend was driving at, he burst out laughing. He laughed loud and long, and his voice rang out clear as the ogene, and tears stood in his eyes. His visitor was amazed and sat speechless. At the end, Unoka was able to give an answer between fresh outbursts of mirth. "Look at that wall," he said, pointing at the far wall of his hut, which was rubbed with red earth so that it shone. "Look at those lines of chalk." And Okoye saw groups of short perpendicular lines drawn in chalk. There were 5 groups, and the smallest group had 10 lines. Unoka had a sense of the dramatic, and so he allowed a pause, in which he took a pinch of snuff and sneezed noisily, and then he continued, "Each group there represents a debt to someone, and each stroke is 100 cowries. You see, I owe that man 1,000 cowries, but he has not come to wake me up in the morning for it. I shall pay you, but not today. Our elders say that the sun will shine on those who stand before it shines on those who kneel under them. I shall pay my big debts first." And he took another pinch of snuff, as if that was paying the big debts first. Okoye rolled his goatskin and departed. When Unoka died, he had taken no title at all, and he was heavily in debt. Any wonder, then, that his son Okonkwo was ashamed of him? Fortunately, among these people a man was judged according to his worth, and not according to the worth of his father. All right. Well, that tells me something pretty important about this community. All right, because if that is true of Okonkwo as a son, that's true of Okonkwo as a father. Oh, sorry. Right? So, Okonkwo isn't judged based on the failures of his father. He is based on his own worth. That also means that Okonkwo's, sons, possibly, in the future, will be living in that same truth. So, how is that going to play out? Okonkwo was clearly cut out for great things. He was still young, but he had won fame as the greatest wrestler in the 9 villages. He was a wealthy farmer and had 2 barns full of yams, and he just married his 3rd wife. To crown it all, he had taken 2 titles and had shown incredible prowess in 2 intertribal wars. And so, although Okonkwo was still young, he was already one of the greatest men of his time. Age was respected among his people, but achievement was revered. As the elders said, if a child washed his hands, he could eat with kings. Okonkwo had clearly washed his hands, and so he ate with kings and elders. That was how he came to look after the doomed lad who was sacrificed to the village of Umuofia by the neighbors to avoid war and bloodshed. The ill-fated lad was called Ikemefuna. Okay, so we don't know this person yet, all right, Ikemefuna, this guy. That's probably what's going to happen in the next chapter. All right, so this is, notice over here in this section, I'm sure there are things that I could have marked and I should have marked. You know what? I didn't. I got caught up in kind of reading that bit. Fine. All right. I want to make sure real fast that character moment and grand narrative. Okay. I didn't get those as I went through. That's okay. You know what? This whole thing is Okonkwo character, right? You don't need to mark that every single sentence you see. I just did a big one. This is all character, all right? This whole chapter is who is this dude, right? There are moments throughout that we highlighted that point to, even the fact that he's severe, right? Okay. There's a specific detail about his character, and that's great, right? But this whole thing is about character. So I'm going to just put a big old star there. And then, for the grand narrative, one thing I'm thinking is we're kind of getting the origin story of Okonkwo, right? So for a grand narrative, Okonkwo, we're getting kind of the creation, all right? Who is this person? Go back up to the questions with those kind of marks. Mark a moment that feels like creation, fall, redemption, or restoration. Hold on. I'm sorry, right here. Creation. The world begins in goodness. Identity is given. We are given his identity, his purpose. Characters are shown to us in their before. They are full of possibility, embedded in a meaningful order. So, this first chapter, we are getting Okonkwo's, possibility and his what is possible for him, right? But we are getting his dad, and I kind of mixed up the names. It's the U name, Unoka. We are getting Unoka. What part of the grand narrative are we seeing here? We're seeing his fall. So I don't know what to do with that information yet. But sorry, another bell. I know that's like giving you like flashbacks and stuff. But anyways, we're getting Unoka's fall and Okonkwo's creation. One is maybe leading to the other, or they're working in tandem. Who knows? I don't need to answer that question now. All right. So if I zoom out, if possible. All right. Notice I read with intention, but you are not marking every single little thing, hopefully that gives you some, just some insight on how to do this assignment with intentionality, with purpose, but also not make it like agonizing. All right. If you have any questions, email me. All right.